Hi, my name is Michelle Bornstein, and I'd like to talk to you today about managing the cost of managed services. I've been supporting Autotask clients for 8 years and in the industry for 17. And the reason I'm here today is to help you understand how critical costs are to your contract profit reporting. Some questions to consider as we go through this presentation. How many times have you paid a vendor for services but the client has canceled their services with you? How do you know when a vendor has increased the amount they are charging you for a particular service? And finally, when a new user or endpoint is added and that service is not covered by your existing contract, are you increasing the amount being billed to the client? Our agenda today is going to consist of system configurations within the Autotask system, financial analysis that will be available based on our configuration, and then maintenance of the system for going forward. When we focus on system configurations, we are going to talk about 4 areas: cost types, service configuration, the contract services themselves on the contract, and then the invoice templates. There are 2 different cost types that we're going to be talking about today. The first area is technology, so the hosting, backup, and cloud services that you're providing to your client in order to meet the contract needs. The remote monitoring tools or endpoint management that you may be using in order to monitor the devices. The resources, which would consist of your internal support team, as well as any contractors or external support that you're leveraging today. Something to note from an internal standpoint, we want to make sure that you're using the burden cost field in the resource record in order to impact the profit of the contract based on hours worked. When we focus on service configuration, we want to encourage you to correspond the services with the vendor bill. So in this example, I have 3 services in detail, 1 from eFolder, 2 from Google Apps. I'm including the vendor name. This is going to be used in future reporting that we're going to look at in the financial analysis section. We want to make sure that these services have a default unit cost. You can override this number when you add the service to the contract, but here we're going to leverage it when we're doing quoting for opportunities, as well as have an idea of what we think the cost should be when we go to set up the contract. And finally, we want to look at the billing code that's in Autotask today and ensure that it matches your income account in QuickBooks. This is the direct link to the financials, the direct impact to the income P&L statement. If you have multiple billing codes or multiple income accounts, we want to have multiple billing codes. In this example, I'm using monthly backup hosting, but if I wanted to also reflect something for cloud or the managed service labor, I would want to have those billing codes referenced and associated with the proper services. From a contract service standpoint, I encourage you to list those individual services that you are providing to the client. You're going to want to match these services to the vendor bill, and you're going to want to ensure that the quantity that the vendor is charging you for is reflected here in the units on the contract. So if you notice that eFolder backup is based on 605 gigs, not 605 endpoints, this is going to give you the flexibility to change this number whenever the vendor is detecting a different amount. When you are reflecting these service details, you should include a unit price if you want to impact different revenue accounts at the time the invoice is transferred to QuickBooks. If you do not want to impact various revenue accounts and you want to have all-in-one pricing or roll up the pricing, I'm still going to encourage you to include the services. In this case, I've shown each individual service, but the unit price is 0. What this will do is extend our cost so that we can get accurate profit reporting, but it will not transfer anything into QuickBooks from a revenue standpoint. The final layer that I want to focus on from a configuration standpoint is your income statement and how the invoice is going to impact that. So in this instance, if we want to show a single line to the client from an invoice standpoint, as well as impact a single income account, you can opt to show all of the recurring service section details in a consolidated fashion. What you would want to do is go to your invoice template, uncheck Itemized Recurring Service Contract section, and display $0 recurring service bundles. This will ensure that all of the charges on that particular contract will roll up and be in a single line on the invoice, as well as transfer in an individual fashion to QuickBooks. If you do have multiple income accounts, I will encourage you to itemize the services on your invoice so that there will be a direct transfer and impact in QuickBooks based on the details that are being transferred through. And you want to make sure that the additional settings has Itemized Recurring Service Contract checked. Before we move on to the financial analysis section, I want to recap what we have covered from a configuration standpoint. We want to identify our costs. We want to know the details. We want to make sure our services are structured in a way that we will be able to get detailed reporting as well as impact the P&L according to the services. We want to make sure that our contracts have the right recurring service charges associated so that we can analyze the profitability of that contract in the future. And we want to make sure that our invoice templates correspond with what we need to transfer through from AutoTask to QuickBooks. From a financial analysis standpoint, we want to focus on the process of reconciliation or auditing the information in the system. We want to look at what our contract profit is by month, what financial trends are available, and what types of dashboard analytics that we can leverage. From a cost reconciliation process, we need to obtain the vendor bill. We have to get the details in order to reconcile or audit or compare what's coming from AutoTask versus what the vendor is billing you for. So in this example, I have a Google bill. It's showing various charges. The domain name would reflect the client that is being serviced by Google. We want to take this vendor bill and compare it against our contract services in AutoTask. So in this example, I have a custom report that I've built, grouped first by the vendor, detailing each client that is receiving this particular service, Google Apps for Work versus Google Apps Vault, the quantity that's associated, the revenue if we're detailing it, the cost, which is going to come from the vendor bill, and then the ultimate profit. What you would be comparing here is cost for each service that's reflecting from the vendor bill. You want to make sure those costs are accurate. You want to make sure the quantities are accurate. If there's a variance, an adjustment needs to be made. Ideally, you would not see a charge on a vendor bill and not have a corresponding service charge in AutoTask. If that happens, that's indicating that a contract is not set up properly or something was missed during the configuration of that particular contract. Once billing has happened, you do have the option to run contract profitability reporting. There are standard reports in AutoTask today that are in summary, but this particular custom report is detailed. It is grouped first by the client contract, and then it's outlining each service that's associated with that contract, as well as any hours or charges that might have been associated from a ticket or direct on the contract charge section. So in the first example, we have Gold IT Management revenue, no cost, because that cost would be associated with engineer support or subcontractor charges. We have each of the services that we're providing, the cost and the profit associated. In this particular sample, it's very detailed, but we absolutely can roll this up where Gold IT Management revenue is consolidated with engineer support, subcontractor costs. But I wanted to highlight the fact that some people are evaluating each cost individually, and I wanted to make sure that you can see both options. The next area that a lot of clients are looking at are trend reports. These are two custom reports, one based on revenue, the other on profit. It should be giving a view of each month that services or billing has happened. You're not only looking at this to see if your clients are meeting what you expect from a revenue and profit standpoint, but in the instance of the revenue report, the exception that you would be looking for is that there was a billing cycle missed. So if you are seeing billing happening in April and then again in June for a particular client, but May is 0, that is most likely an indicator that something happened during a proven post or billing was not processed correctly. The same for client profit. If you are looking at the exceptions, you would want to be looking at low profit or negative profit. That may be an indication that there are many tickets that you weren't expecting. Something could be happening with time entry. So you want to make sure that you're drilling down into the profit numbers and seeing what the trend should be and comparing that against what you expect. And finally, we have some dashboard analytics. This is just a quick sample of information. I wanted to highlight that you can pull financial data onto your dashboards and use it as a quick serve of information. So in this first dashboard widget, the technology cost is reflective of each individual service, the cost associated, and what the profit was. This is based on items that were billed through a proven post, and it's an indicator of what your markup is versus what you expect to be receiving when you provide those services. Tickets completed by month is just a quick show of tickets, and a trend statement or fashion. It could be indicative of more tickets than you're expecting, or it could be trending with what you're expecting from month to month. Device activity can be used to indicate if there is one particular item that is needing to be replaced, if you're having an issue servicing one account and that one device is just causing lots of issues with service. We want to make sure that the activity is not high. We want to be proactive as opposed to reactive. Across the bottom, we have two trends. One is managed service revenue, and the other is profit. This is just sample data based on approved and posted items. Again, we want to see activity in each month. We want it to be what we expect it to be based on our client contracts. If there's something low or missing, that may be an indicator that something didn't happen correctly during billing. And then finally, new configuration items to be assigned. If you're using endpoint management or remote monitoring tools, we want to make sure that these devices are attached to the billing contracts. We want to make sure we're billing for the right quantities. These integration partners are providing the data, but here, if you're seeing that the config item is not attached or assigned, it's going to impact your revenue on your contract until it gets allocated. So from a recap standpoint, we want to make sure that we're reconciling contracts to the vendor bill. We want to ensure that your profit reports are accurate, so this process is going to allow you to do that. We want you to evaluate your contract profit by month in detail or summary. It needs to be reviewed if you're seeing it trend one way or another or not what you expect. Financial trends are going to help not only show you what your path is throughout the year, but also indicate if there are any exceptions. And then finally, leveraging the dashboard analytics that Autotask is providing today will give you that quick informational serve of data, and you don't have to go and generate a report. From a maintenance standpoint, we want to focus on 3 key areas. One is maintaining your contract service amount, or what you're actually billing to your clients today. The contractor cost, so if you're using subcontractors, how do you impact your contracts today with that information? Ensuring that your resources are entering time correctly, and then what are the next steps that you can follow? From a contract service amount standpoint, I want to encourage you to review and update contracts on a monthly basis. We want to highlight areas that can cause some stumbling, which would be entering the effective date when you're updating the service. This date directly corresponds with the start date of the contract. So if you start your contract on the 1st and you want this service to go into effect, or this adjustment to go into effect on the 15th, the system will prorate the charges, cost, and price. So be aware of what date you are making the service change effective so that you get the billing that you're desiring. Also note when you're adjusting units, an increase is a positive number, a decrease is a negative number. Again, just highlighting 2 areas that cause some confusion. From a contractor cost standpoint or subcontractor standpoint, you have a couple of options to record this in your system. The easiest place to input this information is on the contract directly under charges. When the contractor sends you an invoice, you would go here, enter the charge, enter the quantity as the hours, put in the cost or the price that the invoice is for. You would put that in the cost field, and then decide if you want to bill that or not. There are some impacts on reporting based on the billable flag, so be aware of that entry. Once you've entered your quantity, your cost, and you've set it as non-billable, you would need to approve in post. You can leverage the charge defaults to help automate some of these settings so that you don't always have to remember what is the unit price that you need to reflect from the vendor invoice, and then what is the default charge that you're going to use each month. Finally, on this section, if you decide that your contractor should enter their time directly to the system, you would access the admin resource section, and you can set them up with a contractor login, which is very restrictive, but still allows them to come into the system and record their time directly on tickets. When working with resources from a time entry standpoint, we want to ensure that they're recording their hours against the tickets on the recurring service contract. And when they are recording hours, we want them to use a work type that is set as billable. This will not bill the client. This will only give credit to the resource, showing that they were utilized doing billable work for the client. So we want to be aware of what work type the engineer is selecting, because we do want it to reflect positively on their utilization reports and timesheets. So some next steps if you want to implement any of these areas that we covered today: get your detailed vendor invoices so that you know what services you're paying for today and what you need to bill your clients. Audit your Autotask billing codes to ensure that they will map correctly to your P&L. Review your contract service codes. Make sure you're charging the clients for the services you're providing. Update or modify contract counts if that is needed. Make sure that the quantity that the vendor's billing you for is what you're billing to your client. Review your invoice template configuration to make sure mapping between Autotask and QuickBooks integration will work. And then finally, define your report analytics. Determine what you need in order to manage your contracts today. My name is Michelle Bornstein. You can reach out to me at any time. Connect with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or shoot me an email. Thank you.